What's good, everybody? I'm Keandre. This is HoopIntellect, and welcome back to another episode of the HoopIntellect podcast. Apologies for the hiatus between episodes. I should have just waited till I had a little more time to do it consistently, but it is what it is. But as we mentioned before, we'll have get some guests on the show, different voices in the basketball community, from media to people working in basketball to even some players. And today we've got a great guest in the building with us. We've got my guy Jacob Myers from League Him. You've probably seen his stuff all over the place. He's been doing it for a minute now and highlighting some unheralded hoopers, from guys like Aaron Wiggins to J Dub to Bub Carrington, several others along the way. And he's done a lot of traveling and interviewing as of late. So with that, all that being said, welcome to the pod, my guy.
Yes, sir. I'm excited. I'm excited. You do awesome work. I love our hoop conversations, and this should be this should be high level for the hoop junkies.
Yeah. So as he mentioned, we talk fairly often about random things. So I kind of wanted to bring some of that conversation to the pod. I wanted to get into a few different players in a little bit more detail than we kind of can throughout the year. That's kind of what the pod was for in the first place. And one of those people is actually Ace Bailey, who has obviously been talked about quite a bit throughout the year, one of the top prospects in the class. But as of late, he's had a recent surge and has started to hit on some of those things that I felt like were clear improvement areas and things that he could get better at to get to that next level and that next level of impact and things that he would need in the NBA. And he started to do that a lot more consistently. I'll just set the stage for some of that stuff, and then I want to hear your thoughts on his play recently. In the last four games, he has had 7 of his 16 assists on the season, so the decision making has been a lot better than it was in the past. He's actually averaging overall 23 points, 9 rebounds, 1 steal, 2 blocks on 56% from the floor, only 2 turnovers in those last 4 games. So he's been on a heater, and like as I said, the assists and turnovers aren't always just the only thing that you can point to in terms of decision making. The thing I've liked from him is just the getting downhill more, getting to the rim. There's actually a play in particular where he, on the side, on the baseline out of bounds, where he goes to the corner, all those staggers. There was a guy trailing him. Usually earlier in the season, I feel like he would have just shot that, going moving to his right, which he can make a lot of the time. But there's one time in particular where he had just faked, fly by, get to the, pull up. One dribble to the left, and things like that is what I wanted to see. So I'm interested to know what have you thought of his recent play? Has it been what you expected? Is it something that you think is positive, or just everything in between?
Yeah, as you referenced, I was at the UCLA game, and that kind of was one of the first really difference making stretches for him. I thought, kind of building off what you had said, in that game, like the defense, guarding 1 through 5, rotating for blocks, playing the passing lanes. And then, the playmaking, like some of the decision making has been questionable for some. And it's kind of expected. He's one of those guys entering the cycle. He's 6'9". He's a gifted shot maker. He can guard most positions, but at the same time, these flashes of brilliance are also paired with some questionable moments, and it makes you think, what is it going to look like long term? Like, could some of the tendencies um, have an issue, translating to the highest level? But recently, I think he's done a great job, and he's kind of hitting his stride. I mean, this is the time of year, freshmen, you really get a good parameter if they're going to progress, if they're going to slow down, if the heat of conference play is going to cause them to kind of be exposed, whether from the scouting report angle or different schemes are being stacked up. And like you said, to his credit, he's starting to stack some of his best games and build tremendous momentum. The defense, the decision making. You talk about the assist numbers. That night, I think there was 3 or 4 passes he had that easily could have been assists. I mean, they don't exactly have the strongest roster around them to respect to those players. They don't exactly have like a rim finishing big or these high level spot up shooters that would maybe boost the assist numbers of both him and Dylan. I mean, he had one play. I don't know if you saw, like late in the second half, UCLA, he like dives on the ground for a offensive rebound and tips the ball to the corner for Dylan for a three. He missed a three, but like stuff like that. Or you mentioned like playing on the baseline. I mean, he really loves that baseline area. He'll dribble there, and like there's moments where you kind of see it, like you kind of see the brilliance of him long term. Like he'll dribble baseline, get stuck, and sometimes he'll just shoot it. Sometimes he'll like wait, be like triple teamed, and he'll find a way to like throw a bounce pass through traffic. Um, Long-winded response, but yeah, I think he's the most fascinating prospect in the class by far, with the variance of what he become long term. And I think right or wrong, positive or negative, whatever, front office nails it. Whoever has the most accurate evaluation, I think it'll pay off, because he has the type of variance, the type of upside potential concerns that could significantly change the organization's future.
Yeah, I think that he, like you said, he is one of the most interesting prospects in the class because there's kind of two sides to him, and I think explaining who exactly he is, and I actually want to hear your thoughts about what you think his ideal role is in the NBA. But it's undeniable the type of shot maker he is, and I know some people are opposed to like betting on that because in the NBA you want to be able to do other things when that shot isn't falling, and we've seen guys over the years like Jalen Greens, like the guys who come in as big time scorers and might take a little bit more time to fully develop those other parts of his game and have that consistent impact. But you look at what he's able to do from a shot making standpoint, and he might just be one of those rare guys that is good enough to provide that on a game by game basis, and then kind of build on the other things, the field, the decision making, and kind of give him those reps and bring him along in a way that like makes more sense rather than just giving him the ball and asking him to be like live up to the KD, the T Mac, the Paul George type of standards that I feel like are kind of placed on him because when you look at the highlights they can seem super similar, but there are certain things I think he can still continue to get better at in terms of his handle, in terms of like some of that decision making and all that, getting to the rim, creating advantages. I really do like what he does on the defensive end too. But I see him as like 6'9" guy who can fill it up in a lot of different ways, attack off closeouts, do a lot of off ball stuff. They've put him in position to score off of movement and things of that nature. He's done that exceptionally well at 18 years old. I think that's another point that we had talked about before. I don't know if you just mentioned it or not, but the fact that he hasn't had as many reps playing high level competition as some of these other guys. You've got guys who play on the EYBL Scholastic or what formerly was the NIBC, and he was on an independent AAU team. He doesn't have those same level of reps playing against his peers in high level comp, and then getting into the situation like this where he's one of the lead guys on a Big Ten team, and they played a lot of talented to rosters like Alabama and whatever that tournament was called, the players only or whatever
Players
it was.
era, yeah.
Yeah, players era. So I think that does factor into his overall projection, and we're starting to see him hit that stride. So I'll be interested to see how he continues to grow over the rest of the season because I think that he could potentially be turning a corner. The way that he was diagnosing some of those doubles in that second defender was a lot different in those Penn State and Nebraska games than how he was against Kennesaw State, for example, earlier on in the season. So I think he's moving in the right direction. And yeah, so from your perspective, what do you think that his ideal role is in the league? And maybe you could leave some room for imagination too, because you don't have to completely hit the projection on the head right now. I think that's like kind of you get him into your organization, have an idea, but what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm kind of wait and see mode. I think he has traits that you think that you can impact winning early with that type of shooting, that type of length, that type of defensive versatility. I mean, those are early things you can hang your hat on. I think the upside gets unlocked with how the decision making evolves, how the body evolves, how the feel evolves. Like stuff like that's really hard to. I mean, it's really hard to predict. But I think he has a lot of things to build off of, and it'll be very interesting to see kind of how it all goes. And I think a lot of it will, like you said, depend upon what organization he lands in, who's around him. Like if he lands in a team that's not really overly competing, I mean, he could be put in a position where he's getting 10 plus shots a game, and he's handling the ball, and he's allowed to kind of just grow through some of his, having growing pains and stuff, and go through the lumps. I mean, you look at Washington right now, the amount Keyshawn George is playing, the amount Bub Carrington is playing. Like these guys are learning on the fly, and if they were on other teams, they wouldn't be getting these type of reps. So I think it'll depend upon what team he ends up with, but I think the shooting, the baseline athleticism and defense, and then the youth and use of the developmental reps. I mean, stuff like that. It's really intriguing, and it's hard to predict, but it's like you continue to watch, gather all the data, and try and make an informed decision. But I think that, like you said, it's been very encouraging the trajectory he's on throughout the season, and the Big Ten is no joke, man. Like really good coaches, high level defensive schemes, and kind of how we said before, this isn't one of the best rosters in the Big Ten. Um, Not to harp on any of their teammates, but like they're atop all the scouting reports and a high major schedule. They played heavy hitting non conference, so like this is real good film, and we're seeing two 18-year-olds learn on the fly and adjust. And yeah, I'm just excited and interested and curious to continue watching the rest of the year and see how it unfolds.
Yeah, and I wanted to touch on one more thing on Ace before we move on. His BPM is currently at 5.3. I know that's been a big talking point around him in terms of like advanced analytics and finding thresholds and baselines for former players, but 5.3 is a huge jump from where he was earlier in the season. I think it is partially indicative of his improvement, but also kind of just regression to the mean in a player that actually does put as much pressure on defenses as just a shot maker and being one of those top two guys in terms of offense for their team. And he's been positive net rating wise in his minutes too. But yeah, once you get the issue that was earlier in the season, which this is why you always take these small samples with a grain of salt, is he was at like 0 and in the negatives, and guys that have been in that area in the past have never really turned into much in the NBA, like the Zaire Williams, those guys. But I think that he has at least eclipsed that threshold and is in a spot that is gonna, for people who value that a lot, is gonna make them be more interested in what he brings to the table. Me personally, I'm just looking for the outliers, like where he was, and like guys like what Coop's putting up and those types of things. But yeah, he's kind of gotten to a place where I think I said it in the first look video. I thought that he would, based off of what his skill set, and that's positive to see. But yeah, moving on to another really interesting guy in this class, probably top 3 for me, in terms of intrigue and just like who he is as a player, and that is Egor Demin. From BYU. He started off the year red hot. Everybody was going crazy, putting him top 2, top 3, top 5 in every board in mock. And a lot of that was against low major competition, buy games, and things of that nature. But during that span, he was putting up 15 points, 4 rebounds, 7 assists, 2 steals, shooting 59% from the floor, 47% from 3, 52% from the line, which has continued to be a really interesting trend. We talked about this before, but like even Ace, shooting like 60% from the line, which is really strange, especially for a shot maker like him. The rest of the on the rest of the parts of the floor, but yeah, Egor started off red hot, and then in his last 9 games, which is conference play plus the NC State game plus Providence, 8 points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists, 30% from the field, 9% from 3. 70% from the line. So there's been this clear dividing line against these, higher major teams, more physicality, more athleticism that he's had to try to work his way through. He's had some good moments, positive moments in there. I think the last game against Colorado, he had some really intriguing stretches, especially in transition, just the way that he can move the ball, find open teammates. But there has been some real question marks, especially for a guy who will, at his best, provide value or ideally provide value as a playmaker and somebody with the ball in his hands. So I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on just who he is as a player and what you thought of like the recent games and going up against the higher competition.
Yep. Entering the year, I was high on him. What's high? Who knows? But he has some traits that are really, really valuable with his passing. He's close to 6'9", and he's a big guard or playmaking wing, whatever you want to call him. So definitely was on the radar. It was a loud start, like you said. The way he was playing the passing lanes, running in transition, putting up these incredible playmaking performances, and then the shot was falling. I mean, through before the Ole Miss tournament, I don't know what that was called. He was shooting like 53% from three. He had a hot start from three. The mechanics are clean. So you're looking at him, you're like, all right, well, he's running the show for a Big 12 team, albeit versus weaker competition, 5 games. He's making every pass in the book at 18 as an international kid. They are doing an excellent job of like screening actions to give him angles to get downhill to kind of expedite that slashing, give him kind of those angles where he kind of like bounces the ball and holds it against his chest, give himself momentum. He's dunking, like yeah, like it was a loud start to the year. Since then, they've played a tough, grueling schedule in the Big 12, and he's had to adapt. Um, I think off of what you said, the playmaking's still there. It's been there every single game, whether it's off a pick and roll or it's they have him pass out the post or in transition or quick reads off spot ups. Question marks, like he hasn't been making shots past like 2 months. Going on 2 months, he's really struggling to make shots. Mechanics are still clean. Sometimes he like kicks his feet out, which is questionable sometimes. You question the driving, the rim pressure. If you're going to be like a big initiator in the NBA, you'd want a certain level of like, rim pressure, creativity as a scorer, really put pressure on teams with something other than the passing. So yeah, he's definitely, I said Ace is maybe the most fascinating prospect or most kind of high variance eval. I think Yegor is right up there. I talked to scouts that still have him in that top four, still have him in that top five. And I do think, you know, these next couple months are going to be very telling. Not to continue to say like the future will determine it, but I think he's got to show some strides, or the worries will probably continue to get strengthened. I think he's still one of the best talents in the class. At his size, his playmaking, his base level athleticism, and I think defensively, he still had strides even when he struggled. The Colorado game, he had some great plays on the ball. Even in some of the games where they really struggled, he's had some good defensive plays. So I think that's a good thing to build off of. And then, I think we've talked about it in the past, maybe not on air, but the driving's an interesting thing. Maybe we could discuss that. Like there's sometimes he gets good momentum and he can kind of get downhill, and whether it's finish himself or find some guys. But I think that's going to be a key swing skill, the driving, the ability to get downhill with the ball and put pressure on the defense. But yeah, I'm still wait and see mode. He's one of those perplexing ones, but I think I'd be shocked if like he ended up falling out of like the top 10. I don't know what you think. I feel like with this class, we're going to go through some more players, but after whatever your top tier is, for me, it's probably Cooper, Dillon, and Ace. Those three I feel like are talents above the rest of the class. And then, you got guys like, whether it's Trey Johnson or VJ or insert whatever name, Kasparis, who struggled immensely the past 2 games. Like these guys have distinct weaknesses. So you kind of get in this game where you're from afar, it's kind of tough to rank if you don't have a team construct. You know what I mean? Like certain teams have certain things they feel more comfortable they can improve. So like some teams are like, I trust our shooting guys. Like we're going to maximize this guy's shooting. Some teams have, a lot of confidence in their strength and development, or they think they can fix the guy's defensive tendencies, or, stuff like that. So I think for us as a FAR, kind of trying to like build a board on a overall level, just how these players are going to turn out, I think it's unusually tricky because of those weaknesses. We get into like some of the front court guys are all very like niche big men. You got some guys that are elite defensively, struggle offensively, and you guys got a guy like Derek Queen from Maryland who's like incredibly skilled offensively, and then you have his games where he's disengaged, or there's maybe question marks about what he'd be defensively in the NBA. But yeah, I'm curious your thoughts. I think there's a lot to like, but there's also a lot of questions.
Yeah, that's just been the thing with me is determining how much is still there for him to grow into and continue to improve upon in terms of upside and just ability to impact the game consistently. I think my thing, and is why I'm going to end up a little bit lower on him than probably he ends up going, is because I'm just not. I guess it does depend on what happens the next month or so, because he could show some things in the rest of Big 12 play. But I'm just not sure, because he does struggle as much as he has as an advantage creator, getting downhill as a driver, um, and also as a shot maker. It puts him in this weird spot where most likely he's going to go to a team that has somebody else who, or one or two players who are handling the ball, scoring, making plays for the team. I think you look at like a guy like a Min Thompson, as good as he was as a driver at lower levels, OTE. And this is not a direct comparison, but you just look at him and his inability to, his handle still has some work. He obviously can't shoot. They don't play him with the ball as like nearly as much. He's had to do other things to get into their rotation and become this player that he is right now. He's an all-world defender, all-world athlete, so it kind of makes up for it in some ways. And he's still a great playmaker when he does have the ball in his hands. So he's able to impact the game in other ways. You look at a guy like and in that situation in Houston, it's just Jalen Green and you obviously have Şengün. They run through things through and Fred VanVleet, who aren't great. But I think in a different situation, Jaeger gets put in this weird spot where if he's not handling the ball full time, you don't necessarily get his elite passing. You know, you don't get all of that out of that as you would like to. Um, so yeah, that's kind of been my thing. I think I'm more concerned just about the shot, like especially going back to his pass. He never really shot it that well. He's 4 for 37 from three in top 100 games, and that's 8 games. So that would be my main thing, because even like a guy like Yakuchonis, who does at times struggle to like really turn the corner or create supreme advantages from like of what you would want from a lead guard in the NBA. He has been, lights out from three. He's dominating switches. Step back is clearly there. He's really crafty. He gets to the line a lot. So those types of things give you a little bit more confidence. But yeah, I think with Jaeger, when I was looking through like what teams would possibly be interested in him, and you mentioned like you don't think that he will get outside the top 10. I do think that there's like some teams in that late lottery range who would be interested in the 6'9" guy who has, that playmaking feel. If you can just get him to shoot and he does turn into more of a playmaking wing point forward type, he is a great mover. Like you look at those first games of the season, even though those were lower competition, like he looked great in terms of, even hitting some shots off the dribble and those types of things. So I think, yeah, he's just going to be a guy who needs to go into the right situation that's going to give him the right opportunities as a ball handler and have the context of having, some gunners and guys that like attract a lot of defense so that he can, ultimately, do things like bringing a ball up and have that. So I think whoever picks him is going to give him those opportunities, because otherwise I don't think he really should. And hopefully the shot comes around, because that's going to be key for him. Do you have anything else to add on Jaeger?
Yeah, I think we kind of covered everything. It's really going to come down to how much does he evolve as a shooter. If he's on the ball as a primary guard in the NBA, like he's going to need some evolving as a creator, whether it's just getting downhill so that he can make two play one and use that passing, or become a better scorer. And then off the ball, like you said, if he doesn't end up being a primary, it's like you'd want to be able to see him attack closeout swiftly and utilize that feel. And then maybe we didn't talk about defensively. It's like I tend to be a little bit bullish. Like he's not that. I think there's something to work with there with that level of size. And then he obviously is an incredible processor of the game. And I think no crazy statistics here, but just eye test, kind of having a feel. It does seem like the guys with that type of length and feel find a way to be playable defensively. Even just like role players, like you can insert whatever name, just because the speed level of processing the game kind of makes up for the lack of maybe elite athleticism or whatever. But yeah, we kind of covered it. He's
Yeah, I think that
yeah
he's good off the ball. He's a good team defender already. I think he has pretty good hands, passing lanes. I mean, it's also evidenced by like the steal and block rates too.
yeah
But like it would just be more on ball and who he's matching up with. That'd be my main concern. Other
yeah
stuff, I think he does a pretty good job of reading the game, knowing where he's at and help, and you know, coming up with deflections and stuff. But yeah, I agree with you there.
Yeah, there's no doubt in the instincts.
Yeah, for sure. Moving on to Miles Byrd, who has been a big riser this year, big time jump as I believe he's a sophomore because he redshirted that freshman year, technically, but this is third year in college technically, but he is a little bit younger. But as a 6'7" wing at San Diego State, he has been terrific. He's an active defender. He's made a huge jump as a 3-point shooter. He can drive it off the catch and off closeouts. He's got great feel as a passer. Doesn't turn the ball over. I think he's got clear role player NBA upside, and then kind of taking that wherever it leads him in the future. And to be honest, I would consider him as high as the lottery. I think that it's starting to trend that way. He hasn't played great the last couple games. Didn't shoot it well against Air Force, I believe, but he impacted the game in other ways. I think he had like 4 steals and 3 blocks or something like that. But he's been one of my favorite players to watch so far. I think you look at what he did in that Colorado State game. If y'all haven't watched that game specifically, if you want to see his upside, that is one of the best games of the entire cycle, in my opinion, going up against Neat Clifford and those guys over there. But yeah, I've been higher and higher on him. I think that he fits pretty much every team. I know some teams have a question mark in terms of the level of competition overall with them playing who they're playing. But as he continues to move on, if he continues to show himself as a top flight shooter, if he can improve more as a rim finisher, I think that's one of the biggest drawbacks of his game right now, shooting just 52% there. Maybe some of the physicality, but you kind of build that into going to the next level. But other than that, I've been super impressed by him. He's been one of my favorites to watch. What have you thought of him so far?
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head. It's like, in a class like this, maybe it didn't have the strongest returners. It was more of kind of like a strong freshman group. So it's always interesting to see, which guys emerge. Like every summer, there's going to be names that are penciled in as these returners, but there's guys that are in the gym working on their game and buying into their program's developmental plan. And Byrd, to his credit, is that great program that's developed players, and he's gotten better each year. And this year, it might be the year for him. I think, like you said, with some of the performance he's had as late, they played in the players era as well. So they, every NBA team was there, and with the defensive playmaking, like you said, the steals, the blocks, obviously can read the game pretty well. He's great instincts. He can pass a little bit. They run some actions for him to get downhill, makes quick reads in transition. And the shooting, I mean, he's a 40% 3-point shooter, fires in transition, catch and shoot off the dribble. So anytime you have someone with that level of length, he's probably closer to 6'6", long arms. He can shoot, he can pass, and then he can defend. He still has to get stronger, but I think he's shown enough where you pretty safely like put him in, like he'll be in Chicago at the combine, and it'll come down to whether that range, like you said, like we'll see. I think if he finishes the year similarly, I think I'd have a hard time imagining him not be like a first round guy, or at least knocking on the door. If I'm building my own personal board, I personally would love players with those traits, that skill level, the feel, the growth trajectory, and then the ability to shoot and defend. Those are the guys I want on my board. And there's not a lot of that archetype. And then you look at the survival rate over the past how many or so years, like those are kind of the guys that stick, that adaptability, to fit, like you said, on different teams. And there's something people don't talk about enough is like sometimes guys get drafted and then the coach changes, and then that coach plays a different way, and then a player is drafted, and obviously you want to get the best players in the building, but when you can draft a player that can kind of fit in all these different lineup configurations, I think that's super valuable. Not only because the optionality it gives a coaching staff, but then just a player can kind of give the team an adaptable look. And you kind of talked about Aaron Wiggins in the intro. I mean, the Thunder have done an excellent job of that, and a lot of teams have, just starting to prioritize players that can kind of have a baseline across the board of knowing how to play and having the physical tools to thrive on an NBA floor. So yeah, I think he's been one of the more exciting returners that's emerged, and I think he's definitely generated quite a bit of buzz. He'll be watched closely to end the season.
like you said, I think he's plug and play. He's the type of guy that you want. Um, Shoots it, defends, makes plays, great feel, doesn't turn the ball over. Um, Solid size on the wing. I think he can continue to improve there because he still looks super young. I think he's got a lot of room for growth in terms of physicality and those types of things. But yeah, I just see him as somebody who the more I looked at you know how like Tankathon or not Tankathon, how the draft order is kind of shaping out. I think teams from like that, if he does continue to play the way that he has, teams from the late lottery into the 20s are going to be super interested in what he brings because of just being able to play a role, play it well, fit with a lot of different people, and and yeah, if you have a reason to be on the floor, that's what you're really looking for at a certain point. Obviously, you've got the guys with the top upside, and they might need a little bit of tweaking here and there, but they do, a few things well and have that star level impact. But everybody else, you got to be able to defend to get on the floor. You got to be able to knock down shots at a great rate. You got to be able to rebound and play in the pick and roll and those types of things. So I think teams are going to be super interested in what he brings to the table. For that reason alone. Especially like with the Thunder, who knows how their picks are gonna shake out because of like all the protections and all that. But he's somebody who Thunder pick at 18 or something with one of those. It's like why not pick Byrd? Um, he kind of fits a lot of what they like to do. He brings a little bit more shooting. Maybe he takes a year to develop physically, but then you got another guy on a cheap contract who can potentially contribute there as they have to pay J Dub and Chet and all those guys. But yeah, that's kind of how I've seen what he's done.
Yeah, definitely. I wouldn't blink if he went that high. I wouldn't be surprised.
I think that's all I wanted to get to on Bird. Is there anything else? That's pretty much it. I guess I would also add like he's sixth in BPM in the country right now with 12.1. That's the type of error that's like first round pick. If he continues to stay around there, um, just from that threshold, he's up there with like Janai Broom and all those guys, Cooper Flag and all them. But yeah, I wanted to kind of get into some sleepers or sort of underrated guys in the class. They don't have to necessarily be true sleepers in like nobody knows about them or um, guys who aren't on boards currently, but just a guy that you think is interesting or somebody who you think deserves even a little bit more shine than they're getting right now. Um, I'll let you go first, and then I'll add mine. But who you have for that?
Yeah, I think a good one maybe to discuss here would be Rasheer Fleming. We both saw him at Formula Zero Elite Camp, Damian Lillard's prestigious high school and college camp with Phil Beckner in Arizona. And, Rasheer's kind of been one of those sleepers ever since he stepped foot on campus in Philly at St. Joseph's. And, he's this gadgety, he's got a 7'5" wingspan, huge shoulders. Like he checks a lot of boxes physically. And then he's always kind of flashed some touch and some, blocking some shots and rebounding, having a motor. But it didn't really, the first 2 years, it wasn't ever consistent. He was kind of a wait and see sleeper, like kind of hiding, but like kind of hiding in plain sight. And, I think this year he's taken a real leap. It's been consistent. Um, he's providing a clear impact on winning with, his shot, his defense, blocking shots, dunking, hits threes, plays the five a lot for them. They don't really have like a true five on the roster. And I think it's cool. We kind of saw it. A lot of teams saw it as well. A preview where, matched up with guys like Asa Newell and, some of these, highly regarded incoming players and returners at that camp. I mean, he was knocking down threes. He was attacking closeouts. He was finishing with both hands. He was guarding, sliding his feet. So it's always nice to be able to see a player that improves at that rate and kind of see someone start to reach their potential. So I think that's someone to me, we're like about 3 months into the season, correct? Like we gotten like 15 to 20
Mm-hmm.
games in. I think he's clearly made the leap. I think he's clearly asserted himself as a first round pick. And I think he has the upside to
Yeah.
go higher as we get closer, um, to like the whole draft cycle. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe what do you see if you see anything different? But yeah, he's been he's been really consistent for them. And I think another point, maybe before he goes, just his best games have been like against their best competition. I was at when they played Villanova. He was in foul trouble. When he was in the game, he just changed the entire game's intensity. Getting deflections, big dunks in transition, hitting threes as pick and pop guy. He's an outstanding rebounder. Obviously, with that length and strength and motor, you're going to have good tools at your disposal to attack the glass. And then at the Legends Classic was there as well. He played tennis, Texas, and I want to say Texas Tech. Most of the
Yeah, I think
game, he
so.
was best player on the floor with that intensity level, and then just like play finishing. You talked about when you have these young guys in the NBA, you want to look like what can we pencil you in for? Like how are you going to impact winning? Like there's a lot of good players in the NBA, and when you look at each draft class, like most guys don't stick. Like that's just kind of how it is, especially once you get past that lottery. And it's nice to have a player like that who, again, kind of like Byrd, is on a growth trajectory and he impacts winning with very clear things. He's a big time,
Hmm.
uh, big time shot blocker. He can dunk, make threes. Like it's not that complicated sometimes, and he rebounds. But yeah, I think he's made a huge leap, and it's always fulfilling to see someone like make that leap. I mean, you look for the sleepers, I look for the sleepers. It's like you're seeing a like an athlete like get really close to their goal. So it's cool to see that.
Yeah, I think you hit on a lot of points there. I would just add, just his versatility on defense too. Like obviously some of the rim protection, but just being able to do multiple things. And there's like one play specifically that was from a recent game that I watched where, you know, he's navigating a ball screen and still somehow is able to get the tip pass on a lob. Like just being able to cover a lot of ground, playing a lot of different spots, and again, like you said, being able to shoot 40% plus from the 3 point line at 6'9" on like 4 5 ish attempts. That's big time stuff, especially from who he had been in the past. Where it's like, yeah, he can hit them, kinda. It's like more of in theory, but he's really taken that leap this year and become like the idealized version of like all those flashes. So that's been really great to see. And again, like you said, we saw him several months ago, and you could see him in that setting start to really assert himself. The energy I thought was great, especially going up against guys like Asa and some of those other bigs in that field, and just being able to make shots. Be an athlete, be around. Um, we're obviously not as shocked that it happened. In the way it has because we got to see that in that setting. But it's definitely been a big jump from him, and I think that he has put him firmly in at least top 20 consideration. If not just in those 20s for some of those contending teams in the first round. Um,
Another point to that, I would say.
yeah, go
Oh, my
ahead.
bad. My bad. Yeah, another point I'd add to that is like he's found his confidence. Like he's confident, and you kind of flashed
Mm-hmm.
that like in Forma Zero in a setting like that. I did an interview with him, later in the summer before the season started, and like he spoke to, like that helped his confidence level. He mid-major guy, was always this late bloomer. He played in
Yeah.
high school with DJ Wagner and Aaron Bradshaw. They were two of the most highly touted high school prospects over the past couple years. They were big social media celebrities, and he was kind of in the shadows, just kind of improving his game. And he's, I mean, by far the best prospect out of those three right now. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and the energy piece, I think guys like playing with him when you have that level of intensity. He has a nice, like, steady demeanor about him. Yeah, I'm a fan of his game. I think on my personal board, I'd probably be higher than I don't know what the consensus is nowadays. It's hard to know, but I think he'll be a top 20 guy. That's what it looks like.
I like that point that you made. I had been looking at his high school stuff recently because my brother actually played post grad with another one of his teammates from that Camden team, Jerome Brewer, and it is crazy how development is not linear, and there's always different paths to you know to the NBA and ultimately just success. Those guys, Bradshaw, Wagner, they still got some intriguing parts of their games. They could make it happen in the future, but it's not always the ranking. It's not always how much people talk about you on social media or pedigree or any of that. It's just about getting into a spot where you can grow, develop. People are invested in you. You are invested in the program and able to play a role and continue to work on your game. And that's, I think Rasheer is a perfect encapsulation of that. So definitely somebody who I think could end up being like a model for some of these kids, especially as we get further into NIL and like the kind of wild wild west that it is. It's always going to be position fit, program, all that over anything else. You got to be able to put yourself in a position to grow and develop and in a situation that they want you, rather than kind of chasing short term money or situation or brand name. And I think that he's done a great job of doing that.
And I'd add, he did do 5 team workouts last spring. Like he wasn't like we
Yeah,
kind of alluded to it early, but he wasn't this like extreme sleeper. Like
yeah,
he's been on the radar. He did 5 NBA team workouts. He tested like the pre-draft process, and he was hunted in the transfer portal. Like there's people calling his
mm-hmm.
family, calling his old coaches, and he stayed loyal to Coach Lang and to that program, and
Yeah,
it's showing. Hopefully they can. I mean, they're a talented team. Hopefully they're the type of team. We saw it last year. They beat Kentucky. They beat a couple other high major teams this year. I mean, if they get rolling in the Atlantic 10 tournament, they have NBA talent on the roster. They could,
yeah,
get in March Madness and win a game or two. And then that's the kind of thing where you see a real leap in stock because it's just so
yeah,
visible. Like a player gets hot that late. We always see it like, teams start to get nervous that, oh, now it's so loud. Like, and then a guy really rises. But yeah, I think it's a great point you said. Like, he's a good example for players that are, late bloomers or having developed through the noise. And yeah, he's putting together a hell of a season and a very coveted archetype.
mm-hmm. For sure, for sure. The guy I wanted to highlight just briefly, probably won't get into much detail. I don't know if you've seen him as much, but that's Michael Ratai from Oregon State. He's taken a huge jump this year as a junior. Just a quick little brief synopsis on his game. 6'9" forward slash wing. He's physical. He's an active defender. He's a capable driver and passer. Scores quite a bit out of the post for them. But he's able to score pretty well on the interior. And then the biggest thing for me, he's just an improved shooter from last year. I seen a few Oregon State games here and there over the last couple of years. He's been more of a spot minutes guy, contributor, but he's really been one of the leaders of their team, shooting 41% from three, still 3 attempts a game, but he's been big time. And recently in the last week, he just went for 22 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, and 4 blocks against Pepperdine. They're not great, but the game against Gonzaga where he had 29, 7, and 2 in an overtime win, that was a big time one. That's one that's really gonna continue to put him in further conversations, not just about the draft this year, but continuing to grow as a player. And we'll see what happens in the rest of the conference play. But I think he's someone to watch. Overall in the year, he's putting up about 18, 8, 2 steals, 2 assists. He's been in the mix. Really impressive player so far, and coming over from Germany in that Ratio Farm Ohm organization, he's done a good job at finding a school that has poured into him, and he's continued to get better year over year. So I liked him quite a bit. He's somebody I think is going to continue to pop up here and there over these next several weeks if he can have these big time games. Have you seen him at all yet?
Yeah, I think the Gonzaga game was incredible, and like you said, with those traits, the length, the shooting, anyone's going to be intrigued. But it does seem like, at least from the public lens, from the media, it takes a little bit longer for those West Coast guys to get the buzz during college basketball. They play so late.
Yeah,
It's less visible, but like you said, he keeps up that type of production. He'll definitely make some waves at some point.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Let's get into the Hoop Hall Classic and the 2026 draft. I think that is really interesting. I know you were recently at Hoop Hall. I kind of want to get your insights on what you saw there and everything. But this 2025 high school class is terrific. I think at the top of the class, you've got 3 guys who are absolute blue chips. Honestly, I hate saying like can't miss or anything like that because there's always different things that happen along the way, but it's hard to draw up three guys at the top of a class that are as, you know, that have that type of track record, that have that type of physicality and skill level, that AJ DeBansa, Darren Peterson, and Cam Boozer have. And then you've also got several others who are in that mix behind them who are really good. Other different questions in there, but those three in particular have stood out consistently. I know you went down there, you saw a few games. What were some of your lasting thoughts about those guys specifically, and then anything else that maybe stood out to you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's hyperbole or hyperbolic to label that class special at this point. Especially for me, very fortunate. I saw Rutgers and then I saw Duke and then I headed to HoopHall, and so seeing kind of like how those compared, the two classes, and I think at the top they're both heavy hitting, and maybe, I mean, at least from an NBA perspective, I think people prefer the 2026. You talk about AJ. I mean, a
Yeah,
real big guard at 6'9", the type of quick twitch athleticism like you don't really often see. He can change gears effortlessly in a manner that like people in the association can't. Like he has the 99th percentile like athleticism you're going to see on a basketball court, and then he pairs that with like offensive creativity. He's got real charisma and swagger to him. He can handle the ball, show shot making. Defensively, he can do anything he wants. Like you don't want to label these guys too early, but like you said, he's a special prospect. He was at Hoop Summit last year, and with Cooper, Dylan, Ace, all these guys, and like at least to me, I thought he was the best prospect in the building. And that at that time he was 16. Um, then you said Cam Boozer. I mean, I think I put out something. I said like he's almost robotic. The level of
yeah,
consistency, he's efficient. He just kind of can do everything at 6'10", and he's been averaging a double double since he was playing on a Little Tykes hoop. He's he's got NBA pedigree in his blood. And then you go Darren Peterson. That's another guy that's a former zero. Um, One of those big names ever since he was 14 or 15, always on the radar. And it's unfortunate sometimes guys that get that type of acclaim, they tend to fizzle off, whether it's the human psychology piece of it, whether it's the pressure, or their early bloomer. And I think to his credit, man, like he's more than stayed afloat. He
yeah,
appears the way he plays, like he appears pretty maniacal about improving his game. He can get to the rim with both hands. Gets to his spots with a like tremendous amount of precision. He's got counters. He'll kill you with
yeah,
fakes. I mean, the play that sticks out from a zero to me of any player was back to back possessions. The first one he drives left, like full pivot, like turnaround, and the next possession he drives right, does like a full pivot again and goes inside hand with his left. It's like everyone's kind of looking around. I think I was standing next to you and like Jordan Richards from Swish Cultures, and we're like, he's like, nah, DP's crazy. Like that is crazy stuff. And then I think the guy that, at least for me, being in the DMV area, I've seen him since he was 15. Like I think Nate Ament is firmly at the top tier of that conversation. He arguably at HoopHall had one of the best performances. He's 6'9", a late
hmm,
bloomer. He's kind of wiry. He's still growing into his body, but he's a pure shooter. He has terrific touch, off the dribble, off the catch. Highland actually does a lot of like screening actions for him off movement, and he comfortably shoots to his left or right, which is a pretty unique trait for someone his size. He's got a good feel on both ends, and then the real
yeah,
stride for him, and this showed they played against Prolific Prep, and probably the best matchup of the week. And he's like, yeah, 10 free throw attempts. Like he's playing through contact, and playing for Highland. This isn't a Montvert. This isn't a Prolific Prep. This isn't a IMG Academy. He's not surrounded by 5 or 4 star talents. So being there the past couple of years, he's faced a lot of double teams. He's faced a lot of times where defense will put an entire scheme to slow him down because they don't have the type of threats besides of him to like beat you. And I think something that really stands out as of late is he's more composed when he's doubled. He's doing a better job of you know guarding the ball in traffic. Like his handle's pretty fluid for his size. That's something that's continually gotten sharper. And then he's dunking more. He's getting steals, getting blocks. And against Prolific, I mean, in the second half particularly, he took a lot of pride in the matchup with Darren
yeah,
Peterson. He guarded him quite a bit on the perimeter, and he
hmm,
got beat sometimes. Like we said, Darren's a high level guard prospect, but like when within I think minute or so left. It was one of the last possessions of the game. I mean, he was checking him on the perimeter. Darren drove him, stuck his chest out, draw a charge, and they got a huge win for their program. But yeah, I think that four, man, is, if you love basketball, it's hard not to get pretty excited about that class. You got late bloomers, you got guys that are already super polished, and then all of them are going to be in college basketball. Nate is uncommitted, but Boozer's going to Duke, AJ's going to BYU, and Darren's going to Kansas. So it's going to be, I think this year is already pretty entertaining. I think next year is just more of it.
Yeah, for sure. I think, all three of them are really intriguing. Ranking them is really difficult to me because like there's so many different things that they are able to do. Um, Over the last, several months, I've really started to like Darren Peterson even more. I think that he's so far beyond his years in terms of shot making, that precision that you were talking about, footwork. He's a good athlete. He can drive it. He can pull up. Like there's so much there with him, and when you ask him to, he can lock up. It's not always there because that's high school basketball. But I remember there was a time at Formula Zero specifically where Phil Beckner had got on him for kind of dogging it on that end, and then the switch flipped immediately, and everybody that he was matched up with was in a cell from then on. So like those types of things where he's able to do. You've obviously got AJ, who's just like, he might be 6'10". I don't know. He looks like he's continuing to grow. He might be 7 foot by the time he steps on campus.
Yeah, that's a big guard.
Video with him and Jaylen Brown, yeah, he's huge. But what he can do as a shot maker is just so different. What he does as a mover too. Like I've heard that he watches Shea a lot, and I can see that with the way that he uses between the legs and misdirection and all that. I can tell that he studies that. He should not be able to do that at his height, but he is somehow, and he can drive it as well. I think with him it's a weird context. I kind of wish he was playing at a different spot this year, because sometimes the best decision on most possessions is going to be him shooting the ball, like just what it is. And so there's like, when you look at the tape, you can see certain decisions that you wish he would make, but it's like I'm living with him shooting a pull-up three with somebody lightly contesting him, then making an extra pass. No disrespect to those guys over there, they can hoop as well, but like it's obviously levels. But I think that's going to be like the drawback for him. I think he's taken great strides over these last couple of years as a playmaker, but that's going to be the thing for him. And then Cam, again, like you said, like just robotic, just a guy who impacts the game in all facets. May not have like that super clear upside in terms of playmaking and advantage creation. Like I'm not 100% sure what his ultimate ceiling is there, but like he puts up 40 and 20 regularly. He produces at a high level. Kind of reminds me of Cooper Flagg in that way, of just like a guy who finds a way to impact the game in all facets, and then has the physical element to survive. So I really don't know. I don't think you can go wrong with either three of them. And then obviously Nate Ament has continued to take strides as well. I think the physical element is just the thing that keeps me just a little bit lower on him. Obviously you've seen him up close and followed him more directly than I have over the years, so you got a different perspective on that. But that group, if you're a bad team right now, if you can get into that top 3, top 4 of these next couple drafts, you're going to be in position to turn things around a lot quicker than I think, drafts of the past. Well, maybe not drafts of the past, but at least 2024 by far. I think there's probably 5, 6 guys, 7 maybe, who would have been the number 1 pick in 2024 pretty handedly. So that's what we got on the horizon. And I think, for people who are unaware, just continue to watch those guys over these next couple months as we get into like the showcase games and all that, because they are the real deal in that way.
Of all the players we've discussed, not to put you on the spot, but like does one player emerge for you above everyone? If you did the 2024 and 2025 class, like you need a draft today, is there someone that emerges in your brain as a number 1 pick?
In the 2024 and 25?
If you combine the next 2 drafts, yeah.
Oh, the 25 and 20. These next
Oh,
two?
yeah, 25 and 26. Yeah, my bad.
Yeah, I would probably still go with Cooper. I think that, and it's close because I think there's some those other guys in the 25 or 26 draft are really interesting to me, but I think Cooper's starting to figure some things out as an offensive player and like shot maker and just overall, passer and controlling the game that I didn't necessarily expect to see as much of, especially early on in the year when he's turning the ball over and couldn't handle doubles and all that. Um, so I'd probably go Coop, but like after that, it gets really tough. Like I said, that trio at the top of 26, it would be hard to choose between. But yeah, I think it would go Coop, maybe Darren for me, Cam, AJ, and then like Dylan. We'll see what Nate Mint continues to do. But yeah, I think even like Jaden Quaintance, like depending on where he goes as an offensive player the next year, I think he could get in that mix in the. But what he's done defensively has been ridiculous. So I'll probably put him in that mix too. What do you think? I feel like you probably go AJ.
Yeah, I probably lean AJ. You know why? Because I'm not a GM and I can't get fired. You know what I mean? So I'm going upside because I don't have a team logo on my shirt. So why not? But
Yeah,
yeah, I think I'd lean AJ. But like you said, you can make the case for a lot of these players. And the good thing is there isn't a draft today. There isn't even this year's draft for another 5 months.
yeah.
And there's a lot of high stakes basketball to be played. Speaking to Cooper, man, that last game against Boston College, like I think you kind of talked about it with getting downhill, creating off the ball. I mean, Coach Shire is like, I didn't expect that type of usage this year. And like you said, he had lumps early, like in big moments. He turned the ball over late. He's turning it over, or maybe sometimes he's taking inefficient looks from two. But yeah, I mean, when he gets downhill and he kind of bends defenses to his will, then he has that passing element. If we're talking like, if I'm a GM, I want to sleep good at night. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's someone you feel pretty comfortable building around in your future with the level of competitiveness, intensity, and having that feel and physical tools and handling the ball. Like it's there's a lot to be excited about from a NBA draft prospect lens for sure.
I've been really impressed. I think there's always this talk about like USA basketball, like we don't have any stars, and we can't compete with the Jokic, the Lukas, the Giannis, the Embiids. Um, but I think obviously those are lofty standards for any player. Like we always want to call people generational and this and that. It's like Jason Tatum is one of the seven best players in the world right now. He's not generational, or he's not. He's excellent, but it's like so hard to. You could be a great prospect and still not be like a top 15 player of all time, LeBron standards. Um, but I think like those guys that are on the horizon in Coop and Dylan and those guys are gonna put us in a really good position to continue being super dominant. And like I remember looking at all those 2028 like USA team projections after this Olympics and everything, and I was like, I think it's gonna be a little bit younger a team than y'all are expecting. You got the still some people still had KD on there, or like Steph was still gonna be playing. I'm like year 3, 4 of Cooper, AJ, Cam Boozer, like you got
Paulo.
Paulo, Chet, like all those guys still doing their thing. Like that's gonna be a tough team to pick from.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have, man.
Yeah.
It's a really good problem to have.
But yeah, I think that's all I wanted to get to in this podcast episode. Tell all the people where they can find your stuff, where you at, what type of stuff is coming on the horizon. I know you got a special guest coming on your podcast soon, so let everybody know.
Yeah, for sure. You can type in League Him on anything, it should come up. Leaguehim.com is our website. We'll have more long form stuff on the way. We have an article coming out on the my travels over the past week, seeing some of the top 2025 and 26 draft prospects, and then the podcast episode with Bub Carrington, Washington Wizards point guard, one of those late bloomers we discussed earlier. Um, Great conversation with Bub. He kind of dives into his late blooming journey, why he outdeveloped his peers, and then some of the adjustments he's had to make. Currently leads the NBA in minutes for rookies, leads them in assists. He talks about some of the learning curve, some of the players that have helped him, and more. It was a cool conversation. He has a bright future, and yeah, I appreciate being on here to talk anytime. I love your work. You're super sharp and smart, way smarter than me, and yeah, no complaints.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on, bro. Everybody watching this episode or listening to it, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Definitely be sure to leave a 5-star review in wherever you're listening to the podcast on the audio. Really appreciate that. We're gonna try to get this out a little bit more regularly over these next couple months leading into the draft as we get ready for some more of these scouting report videos to come out full time as we get into like March and everything. But yeah, I appreciate my guy Jacob for coming on the show, and that's gonna do it for this one. As always, I'm Keandre. This is HoopIntellect. Till next time, I'm out.